Thomas Bradford had always considered himself a patient man. At 69, had accumulated a lifetime of experience, a modest fortune earned with careful work, and a quiet dignity that had seen him through storms most men would have crumbled under. But patience, Thomas had learned, was not a virtue for the faint of heart. It was a weapon, one he wielded with precision when the moment demanded it. The beginning of his ordeal came unexpectedly, as most life-altering events do. It started innocuously enough. Thomas had been invited to a weekend gathering by his old friend, Leonard. Leonard, a robust man in his 70s, lived with his wife, Clarissa, in an expansive countryside estate that seemed more a fortress than a home. Clarissa, in her late 60s, was known in the social circles of their town as an exacting, commanding woman, someone whose influence often overshadowed Leonard's cheerful meekness. Thomas arrived on a warm Friday afternoon. The estate was breathtaking, the gardens meticulously curated, fountains sparkling under the sun, and the mansion itself boasting the kind of opulence Thomas had always admired from a respectful distance. Leonard greeted him with a bear hug, a warmth that momentarily dulled the tension he had felt driving through the winding roads. But Clarissa's welcome was icy. The moment Thomas stepped inside, her eyes appraised him with the sharp scrutiny of a hawk. "Thomas," she said, her voice polite but brittle, "I hope your journey wasn't too tiresome. Do make yourself useful while you're here. Leonard will expect you to help with the estate chores." Thomas paused, unsure if he had misheard. "Excuse me?" Clarissa's lips curved in a thin, merciless smile. "I said, serve my husband while you're here, or leave. It's that simple." The room seemed to constrict. Leonard shifted uncomfortably beside her, muttering something incoherent, but Thomas heard enough. Serve her husband. Do what? Fetch his slippers? Massage his tired feet? The absurdity was almost comedic, if it weren't so infuriating. Thomas, a man who had spent decades earning respect, managing businesses, and raising a family with dignity, felt a rare surge of anger. He straightened, met Clarissa's gaze evenly, and said calmly, "Then I choose my suitcase." The words landed like a hammer. Silence fell over the room. Leonard looked at Thomas as if he had suddenly become a foreign creature. Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said," Thomas repeated, more firmly, "I choose my suitcase. I will not serve your husband, or anyone. I came as a guest, not a servant." Clarissa's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough to reveal the cunning behind her veneer. "Thomas," she said slowly, deliberately, "this is my home. You're welcome to leave. But don't expect Leonard to. Defend your pride. Loyalty is earned here, not demanded." And with that, Thomas turned, retrieved his suitcase from the car, and left the estate with his head held high. Every step back to his car felt like reclaiming pieces of his dignity that had been challenged in that moment. Yet, as he drove away, Thomas didn't feel relief. He felt a spark, a slow, deliberate ignition of a plan that would bring not only justice but a lesson in humility to the woman who thought commanding respect was synonymous with earning it. The first step in Thomas' strategy was observation. He began by frequenting the town's social circles, casual gatherings where Clarissa's influence ran deep. She was, as expected, the center of attention, directing conversations, subtly mocking others, and subtly reminding everyone that Leonard was under her thumb. Thomas, meanwhile, positioned himself as the quiet observer, an unassuming figure whose presence was overlooked but whose mind catalogued every detail. It wasn't long before Thomas noticed patterns. Clarissa's influence, while vast socially, had weaknesses: her vanity, her desire to be admired, and her obsessive need to control appearances. She hated being contradicted, feared exposure, and was deeply insecure about her social standing. That, Thomas realized, was the perfect leverage. He began by small interventions. A carefully worded note here, a subtle tip there. He informed Leonard's distant cousins, who had long suspected Clarissa's domineering nature, about some minor estate mismanagement. He reached out to contractors who had dealings with the estate, hinting at irregularities that Clarissa had carefully hidden. All of this was done discreetly, with no trace pointing back to him. Meanwhile, Thomas cultivated a new persona in town, a retired businessman, modest, unassuming, but quietly shrewd. People trusted him. He was approachable, the perfect spy in plain sight. And slowly, the dominoes began to fall. The first public humiliation came at the town's annual charity gala, a lavish event that Clarissa adored, a stage where her social prowess shone brightest. Thomas attended, uninvited initially, but managed to secure a seat through careful networking. Clarissa, as usual, held court with Leonard trailing behind her, a perfect picture of subservience. Midway through the evening, as Clarissa was recounting a story about her estate's success, and subtly taking credit for Leonard's management, the event coordinator approached her with a document. Confused, Clarissa unfolded it, only to realize it was a detailed audit of her finances. A contractor had tipped the organizers about unpaid fees, mismanaged accounts, and improperly filed permits. The evidence was irrefutable, and it was all presented in the room full of the town's elite. The effect was instantaneous. Whispers swirled, eyes widened, and Clarissa's carefully cultivated image began to crumble. Her face flushed crimson, and for the first time, the woman who commanded attention and respect felt vulnerable, exposed. Leonard, bewildered, stood by helplessly. And in the corner of the room, Thomas observed quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The first domino had fallen. But though mass revenge was not yet complete, he knew that humiliation alone would not suffice. It had to be personal, deeply unsettling, and transformative. Over the next months, he intensified his efforts. He befriended Leonard, subtly empowering him to reclaim his voice, planting ideas and reminders of his own worth. He arranged private meetings under the guise of casual conversation, building Leonard's confidence while Clarissa remained oblivious to the influence Thomas was exerting. Then came the pivotal move. Thomas invited Leonard and Clarissa to a charity auction under the pretext of helping the town's hospital. Clarissa, ever eager to display her generosity, agreed. The auction was grand, attended by influential figures, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. As the auction began, Thomas revealed his masterstroke. He had anonymously donated a collection of rare antiques for bidding, artifacts that Clarissa had long coveted, yet never owned. The twist: every piece came with detailed provenance, highlighting errors and negligence in Clarissa's estate management that would have otherwise discredited her expertise in collecting. When the auctioneer unveiled the first item, Clarissa gasped. The piece, a rare 18th-century vase, carried a note detailing its authenticity and a subtle critique of how her own estate's replica was inferior. The room buzzed. Each subsequent item followed the same pattern, beautifully curated, each one a mirror reflecting Clarissa's arrogance and failures. The climax came when the auctioneer, revealing the final piece, a long-lost painting rumored to be in Clarissa's collection, paused dramatically. This final item, he announced, was discovered due to an anonymous tip highlighting irregularities in estate holdings. It's being returned to the rightful owner, courtesy of a concerned citizen. Clarissa's composure shattered completely. She tried to protest, to assert control, but the crowd, sensing the drama and the truth, rallied quietly behind the revelations. Leonard, now fully empowered and aware of the manipulations, stepped forward for the first time publicly. Clarissa, he said firmly, I've stood silent too long, but this ends today. We will manage our lives without deception or intimidation. Thomas, watching from his discreet corner, felt a deep satisfaction. The culmination of patience, observation, and careful orchestration had brought justice, not just humiliation. Clarissa's reign of control had ended, replaced by accountability, honesty, and a restoration of dignity for Leonard. Months passed. The estate, once a symbol of Clarissa's dominance, transformed. Leonard took over management, implementing reforms suggested quietly by Thomas. Clarissa, though still part of the social scene, found her influence curtailed, her arrogance tempered by the public exposure of her flaws. She never fully recovered her previous stature, and Thomas knew she would never again underestimate a man of integrity. As for Thomas, he returned to his quiet life, suitcase permanently unpacked, dignity intact, and a sense of fulfillment deeper than any material reward could provide. He had chosen his suitcase, indeed, but in doing so, he had carried not only his belongings but the power of strategic patience, justice, and moral triumph. In the end, everyone who had witnessed his departure that fateful afternoon, the cold command, the choice of freedom over servitude, understood, silently, that Thomas Bradford was not a man to be controlled, manipulated, or underestimated. His revenge was not loud, brash, or vengeful in the conventional sense. It was precise, transformative, and unforgettable. And that, Thomas thought with a quiet smile, was how a man chooses his suitcase, and changes the course of others' lives forever.